You can take it away.
All
Mark
right.
Beedle from Power Pivot Pro presenting on star schema data model design.
Yes. I'm going to assume you can all see my screen, and if you can't, you're going to start yelling at me that you can't see it.
We see it.
All right. So I'm going to start out by saying I have 0 PowerPoint slides. All my slides are in Power BI, so death to PowerPoint. Not a big fan of. I lived in PowerPoint for the last 2 weeks, and so I'm happy to be out of PowerPoint. So as Greg mentioned, we're going to look at the star schema and maybe how to get there, even though we don't have the most ideal data source to get there. So who am I? Why should you listen to me? My name is Mark Beedle. I am a principal consultant at Power Pivot Pro, or P3. I joined P3 pretty recently, back at end of 2020. Before that, I was at Tempur-Sealy, the mattress company. So I do sleep on a Tempur-Pedic, and it is the most comfortable bed that money can buy. You can see on the screen that I have a beautiful wife and 2 cute kids. I like riding my motorcycle when it's not broken, which it is right now, plus it's snowing here in Kentucky. And then during COVID, I thought I would learn how to play bass guitar, and then that didn't happen. So it's still on my slide because eventually I'm going to learn to play bass guitar. You can see my Twitter handle or my email address if you ever want to contact me. Moving on. What's the story behind this presentation? So I mentioned that I worked at Tempur-Sealy before coming to P3. My most recent role was on a BI team where I was tasked with building out an enterprise data warehouse. Now, I don't know if anyone else on the call has ever built an enterprise data warehouse, but it feels like it's never done, right? And our data warehouse was like tied to going live on a new ERP system. And so it was just this long, drawn out project. We had folks in the business that wanted to use Power BI, but they didn't have a data warehouse to use, right? They didn't have this awesome EDW that they could go and grab data from. They were still working on Excel files being their data sources. And so, we did some Power BI training with users in the organization, and I don't know about anyone else on the call, but when you look into how to do Power BI the right way, everything talks about a star schema, right? And everything kind of assumes that you have a data warehouse with fact tables and dimension tables, and we just didn't have that. So I kind of built out this presentation to kind of walk through how do we build a data warehouse, how do we build a star schema when we're waiting on the BI team to deliver this data warehouse, right? So that's our story. Now let's dive in to our next Power BI report or slide, however we want to call it. So let's talk about what a star schema is. So one thing I'll talk about, I'm not going to do anything fancy in this presentation. We're kind of starting at the basics. And the reason I do that is the star schema is really like the core of a good Power BI report, right? So if you're having to write some really crazy DAX, most of the time you probably have a modeling problem. And so we're going to talk about a star schema and how to get there. But if we have some new folks that don't know what a star schema is, we're going to talk about that a little bit. So you can see on my screen here, it kind of looks like a star. In the middle, we have what's a fact table, and then everything outside of that, we have dim tables. So at P3, we don't talk about fact tables and dim tables. We talk about data tables and lookup tables. Now, before I got into the BI world, I was an Excel guy at heart. I loved Excel, and I actually, it's funny that I'm a Power BI consultant now because I fought against Power BI coming into my organization because I said all people want is data in Excel.
Can we
Give people,
celebrate Excel real quick? Maybe just like give a hands of applause or something. Just it's where we all started, right?
yes, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I said, what's the point in a visualization tool? Because all people want is a VLOOKUP and a pivot table, right? That's all I wanted. Um, Now I've come around and fallen in love with Power BI, but one way I talk about the difference between a dimension table and a fact table, or more like a data table and a lookup table. If you're going to use a VLOOKUP to get information about a transaction, that VLOOKUP should be a data table or a lookup table or a dimension table, right? The lookup tables tell us the who, the what, the why, the where, the when, and the data table or the fact table tells us the fact, right? What we want to do math on, right? And you'll notice on this pretty picture here, we've got all these keys and then some quantity and cost number columns, and then the same kind of key over here in our lookup tables. And if you don't have a data warehouse and you're not connecting to a database, those are pretty foreign. Like how do you get those keys, right? I hear people talk about, it's better to do a relationship on an integer key. But my folks, we had Excel, right? Excel doesn't have those fancy surrogate keys, right? So we're going to talk about how we build that when we have a big, massive, wide Excel spreadsheet. Now, Microsoft has some pretty good documentation talking about the benefits and how to do a star schema. So I'm putting a link in the chat with some good documentation around the importance of a star schema. But it really, I can't stress enough how helpful it can be for your Power BI reporting if you start using a star schema today, right? It makes DAX easier. It makes building your visuals easier. It makes the compression of your data model better. It makes things faster. Like there's really no downside to building a star schema, except sometimes it's hard, right? So that's my story. This is what a star schema looks like, but I bet if we looked out in the wild, most Power BI data models look more like this, right? This doesn't
Yeah.
look like much of a star. We usually have one really big, long, wide table with lots and lots of columns because it came from Excel. And I don't blame people, right? Like with a normal pivot table, you had to do all those VLOOKUPs so that you had it in one table to pivot on. So it's kind of getting out of those old habits from the Excel days to how do we build a star schema. So that's my goal for today is how do we get from this to a star schema, right? Now, this is for my friend Alex. I think he's in the meeting. It's really easy to build. We just put a star on it and we call it a star schema.
We're done, right?
That's my presentation.
There
Hope
we go.
hope you all had a good night. I'm done. No, okay. So moving on. I'm going to take off my consultant hat. I'm going to take off my BI hat. And we're going to step into a scenario of how we're going to build this star schema together, right? So here's the scenario. And I should have mentioned this in the beginning in my intro slide. If you saw my video before I turned it off, I'm a big Office fan. So here's our scenario. I'm an analyst for Dunder Mifflin, the paper company. And we've recently been acquired by Sabre. Now, there's this huge initiative to move to a new ERP system. Microsoft Dynamics AX is going to solve all the world's problems. But the BI team is heads down trying to build an EDW, and I got to do a dashboard for my boss, right? I don't have fact tables and dimension tables to get to. All I have is the same super wide spreadsheet that I'm used to getting from my legacy system, and I got to build a star schema out of it. All right, everybody on board? That's our scenario. We're going to end up with a star schema like this. That's the goal. So, end of slides. Let's get into Power BI Desktop after a drink of water. Okay, so let's look at the data we have. So here I am as an analyst, and this is what I'm used to getting. This lovely spreadsheet that gets exported out of our ERP system, and this is what we've got. So I'm just going to scroll to the right, scroll to the right. I'm scrolling, I'm keep scrolling. I got lots and lots of columns. So A through AX. It's a lot of columns. So let's dice this up and let's build that star schema. Oh, I should also mention, this is only Dunder Mifflin data. I have to start pulling in that Sabre data as well. So I went to the Sabre folks and I was like, hey, I need you to produce this same output with all 56 columns so that I can put them together and build a pivot table around it. The Sabre team said, no way, we're not doing that. We'll give you a stripped down version of it. So let's look at what Sabre's going to give me. So I got this Sabre file. It's not nearly as bad, right? I've got quite a few less columns, but I've still got mixed in. I don't need, city, state, zip code, all these things in here. So that's kind of where we landed. That was the compromise that Sabre came up with to give me a data feed of that from their system. So I'm going to go ahead and try to build out a data model from that. So I'm an Excel guy. I'm going to go get data from Excel. I'm going to get my Dunder Mifflin data. And because Microsoft makes this button on the Get Data button yellow, I'm just going to go ahead and load it because it's wanting me to load it. And once that loads in, I'm going to go grab my Sabre data and get it as well. And I see my Sabre sales table. The button says it's yellow, so I'm clicking load, so I click load. Okay, so here's my data model. At least I don't have just one table. I got two tables, but it still doesn't look much like a star. And I know I've watched a lot of Guy in a Cube videos and read articles. I know I need to build a relationship between these so that I can write DEX against them, but I don't know what column could relate them, right? I mean, I could do, I guess, order date to order date, but then I get this many to many warning, so I don't like that. Maybe it's, yeah. I don't think there's a way I can relate these tables because I hear everything I read says it should be a one to many. So let's forget about that yellow button and let's get into Power Query. Let's do some cleanup on this data. So if I look at my Dunder Mifflin data, man, I've got so much data in this table. At P3, we call this a Franken table, right? I've got dimension and data or lookup data in here and fact data or transaction data. I got to do something with this. So, and I really want them in one table, right? I want the center of my star to be like a sales data table. But I don't have the same columns in my Dunder sales and my Sabre sales. But I think I have almost everything in Sabre that I have in Dunder Mifflin. So let me try this. So I'm gonna get rid of some of these columns in Dunder, right? So I happen to remember what I have over in my Sabre file, so I'm gonna kind of match up. So I'm getting rid of a bunch of junk. Hopefully I don't need it later, but we'll see. A lot of stuff about products. A lot of stuff about geography. Sabre said they couldn't give me this all these other fields, so I'm going to get rid of those. All right, so looks like they kind of match. I know one thing. So Dunder Mifflin stores my sales reps as first name and last name. Sabre said they were giving it to me in a combined column. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to use my favorite button in Power Query, column from example. So I'm going to highlight my first last name, and I'm going to use columns from example. Oscar Martinez. All right, it picked up all of my different sales reps. Perfect. We'll call this sales rep. And then I can get rid of these sales rep first and last name columns. So let's whack those out of the table. Remove these. All right, so I think I can append them to each other, but Sabre told me, hey, we sell top quality printers. We do not need promotions, so we don't use promotions. So over here in my Sabre table, I don't have any promotion columns. So I need to keep that in mind after I do this append. But let's do this. Let's take Dunder and combine it with Sabre. So I'm going to go append my queries. Append Dunder and Sabre. And then I got to rename this because this is no longer Dunder sales. This is combined sales.
Hey, Mark, this is Alex. Can I ask you a
Yep.
question if you don't mind?
Yep.
So I see this a lot, especially obviously within kind of the Excel crowd. And I was a little bit curious too on another question, but it all ties together. Kind of the yellow button, just load the data, get it on the canvas as quickly as possible, find value in Power BI, find insights, worry about cleanup maybe potentially later. So you had mentioned here as well this idea of appending data together.
Yep.
So I'll see that they connect to a spreadsheet. They've got 10 tabs. They just click all 10 tabs, bring them all into separate queries. They're all the same data. They don't actually append them. They just bring 10 tables into Power BI and start mishing and mashing. How do you explain terms like append, merging? How do you translate that for the business and why it's important?
Yeah, so I use when I talk about merging queries, I typically talk about what they do as a VLOOKUP, right? Because the Excel crowd knows VLOOKUP. I was never an index match guy. I'm always a VLOOKUP through and through. But so I talk about merging as I say, whenever you would do a VLOOKUP, use merge queries. And then when I talk about append, because I remember the days of combining spreadsheets. So if I copy all the data from one worksheet and paste it into another worksheet so that I can do a pivot table on that, that's what I talk about append for, right? Because I want it in one, single table. So that's what I do with merge and append.
No, that's great. Like I said, it's things where I see where it's one sheet that's dedicated to the year 2010, and it's the analytics for just that single year. Like it's breaking free of kind of these traditional silos of this one spreadsheet does this one thing, where it's like, well, you could have a query that does everything for multiple years, multiple things.
Right.
Just, like I said, curious just how you approach that with the business.
Cool.
Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
Hey, Mark, this is Greg. Hey, real quick, why would you not append into a new append into a new
a new query, a new table.
yeah. Instead of creating that combined sales, just do append as new.
I easily could have, but what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to disable the load on my Sabre table.
Right. Yeah.
And so if I had appended new, I would have had to disable the load on Dunder sales, and it's one more click.
Okay.
Right. So I'm just trying to be
Gotcha.
as efficient as possible. So if I can save myself some clicks, I save myself some clicks.
Okay. Thanks.
That work? Cool. All right. The other thing I'm going to do is a little bit of cleanup. So when I disabled the load on this, I'm going to move it to a group called not loaded. And then I want to forget that that's even there. Then I'm going to actually move combined sales. I'm going to move that to a group called data tables, right? I like data tables and lookup tables. But here we go. I've got my combined sales. Remember I talked about promotions, right? So Sabre doesn't have promotions, Dunder Mifflin does. I'm going to do some column profiling on this, and I bet you this null is all that Sabre data that just came in empty. So I'm going to use a nice replace here. So replace values, and I'll say replace null with no promotion. Let's see. Did that work? All right, I see no more nulls here. I like that a lot better. All right, so I could close and apply, and I could, I've at least combined them into one table. Still doesn't look much like a star. And I don't have all those fancy surrogate keys and lookup tables, but I could at least do some analysis on this. But I want to take it a step further. I want to do what the best practice documentation tells me to do and build out a star schema. So the first thing I'm going to do is, if you remember, I moved a bunch of product information. And the reason I was willing to get rid of all that product information was Sabre has this master data management department that they define all the attributes of a product, right? And they said, we'll give you a spreadsheet of that. So I'm going to go grab that spreadsheet real quick. So I've got this product master that the MDM team gave me. Let's take a look at that. My button's yellow here. I'm going to click OK. We're already in Power Query, so that's helpful. So here we are in a product table. And this looks better. This looks like what I read about as what a lookup table or a dimension table looks like. I've even got this fancy key, right? This integer that we talk about. So I like this. So I'm going to leave it as is, but I'm going to move it. I'm going to move it to a group over here just to keep my brain straight. And we're going to call this lookup tables. Right? Now, it would be awesome if I had one of these for all my branches and all of my sales reps and all of my promotions. I think I'm going to try to slice and dice this Franken table and see if I can just build out my own lookup tables. So I'm going to duplicate this query. Duplicate it, move it into lookup tables, and let's see what we can do. So I want to start out with a branch table, right? Here's all my different branches. So I want the branch, the city it's in, the state it's in, and the zip code. I'm going to remove everything else except those four. And that looks a little bit better, but I don't have my fancy key. I don't have like unique rows for every branch. So I'm going to remove duplicates and see if that looks better. There we go. There's my 14 different branches that I'm used to used to seeing in my reports. So I'm going to add a column, and I get to add this index column. And that gives me my fancy surrogate key, right? This is what all those data warehouse nerds talk about. Here's a surrogate key. I don't like the name index. Now I could right click and rename, right? So let's call it branch key. But that added an extra step over here, my applied steps. I'm trying to be efficient, so I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is up here in my formula bar, when I created this index field column, it came over as index. But if I just name it up here, branch key, I saved myself an applied step over here, and I still got to my same result, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to leave it that way. And I've got, let me rename it. So we'll call this branch. And we got 2 lookup tables. We're doing good. So let's do, I need to do one thing on branch real quick. For those of you who import data from Excel, this is probably a big pain point. If you look at my zip codes, Dunder Mifflin is based in the Northeast. And I've got zip codes with 4 digits instead of 5 digits because of that stupid leading 0. So maybe if I make it text, it'll come back. It did not come back. It just moved it to the left. So I'm going to do a custom column. We'll call this one zip code with a space. And I get to use some fancy M skills here. I'm going to say text.pad start from my zip code. So I want it to be 5 characters. If it's not 5 characters, I want to pad it with zeros in front of it. Every time I write a custom column in M, I cross my fingers when I hit OK. So I'm going to cross my fingers, hit OK, and I got my leading 0 back on my New Jersey zip codes. Great. Let me get rid of this zip code. I don't need it anymore. And then I'll make this a text. So I got branch and I got product. Let's try to do something else. Let's go grab currency. All right, here we go again. Duplicate. Move into my lookups. I'm going to grab currency code, currency name, get rid of everything else. Remove my duplicates. Add my index. Rename it up here in my formula bar. So this is currency key. Rename my table. Currency. All right. Let's do it again. We're going to go faster this time. This time I want promotions. So call it promotion. I'm going to go grab my promotion stuff. Promotion, promotion description, promotion type. Remove other columns. Remove duplicates. Add an index. I feel like I could be one of those data warehouse nerds now. This is pretty easy. Promotion key. All right. The only other thing we've got in here that I could maybe get rid of is this order type and order channel. Now I could split them out into 2 different tables, right? An order type table and a channel table. But I'm going to build what the nerds call a junk dimension. So let me do my same trick again, right? Same thing. Duplicate my query, move it into my lookup tables. I only want order type and channel, so remove everything else. And let's take a look here. So I've got 2 different values. It's either order or return. And then over here in channel, I've got reseller, and store. Those are my only options. Oh, no, I got more. Catalog, online, reseller, store. So let's do, instead of remove duplicates on order type, let's remove duplicates on both of them. Because really what I want is like a unique combination of every type of order type and channel. Perfect. Let's add our index column. Call it order details key. Rename my table. Order details key. All right. I bet some of you are thinking, why do I keep duplicating this query? Why don't I reference it? Here's why I can't reference it. Because my whole point in all of these building out lookup tables is I actually want to get rid of every single one of these columns, right? So, because really, when I look back at the documentation, it says my fact table or my data table needs surrogate keys that are integers and numbers that I want to add up, right? So let's do that. So let's do some merging or some vlookups, right? So here I am in my data table. Let's do some merges. Let's merge combined sales with branch. And we're going to match up store name to store name. Click OK. And I get my fancy, I don't know, URL table. But I have my fork in the road button up here at the top. So I click that. The only thing I want to bring over is branch key. So I'm going to bring in branch key. And so now I've got a link, right? I've got that surrogate key to my branch table. Now, normally I would do all of these merges and then remove my columns, but I want you to see the benefit of each one of these branch keys. So I know I could consolidate the removals into a single step, but this is better because you can see the value, right? So branch key. So now that I have branch key, I don't need store name, zip code, city, or state. So let's get rid of them. Let's do it again. Let's merge with currency. So currency code equals currency code. Expand that bad boy out to give me my currency key. Let's get rid of currency code and currency name. Rinse and repeat. Oh, I didn't give it time. Let's merge it with order details key. Now this one's a little bit trickier because I need to match up order type and channel with order type and channel. Notice that 1 and 2, 1 and 2, right? There we go. Expand it out, bring in my order details key. I can remove these columns now. So like my Franken table is not looking too much Franken anymore. I'm getting better at what it looks like. So let's do one more. Let's grab promotion. Let's do product. Product number equals product number. Grab our nice key. And then we can get rid of product number.
Hey, sorry to interrupt you here, but on the product, you got that product master from the one company. Did that product master also include the
Dunder Mifflin?
Yes.
It did, because they're corporate, right? Saber's master data management team. They own products both in Dunder Mifflin and Saber. Thankfully,
all right.
It made my life easier.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yep. All right. Let's do one more. Let's grab promotion. Promotion equals promotion. Let's grab promotion key. Perfect. All right. Remove those. Now, I forgot to do sales rep. So we're just going to remove sales rep. Oh, wait, what'd I do? Thankfully, I can undo in Power Query. Where'd my branch key go? That ain't good. I think I had them highlighted. For those of you that wanted me to consolidate all of my removed columns into one step, you get your wish now. That's the beauty of deleting steps in Power Query.
Mark, I love that you got an eye to the chat and you're running a presentation. Seriously, hats off.
Well, I'm not catching them all, but I'm grabbing some of them. So, all right. I don't know. I think I lost my branch key. Let's see. Currency, expanded branch. Oh, I forgot to delete that step. All right. So let's get back to the bottom of our applied steps. Much better. I like my keys. I'm gonna forget sales rep exists. Let's get rid of all this Franken table stuff. I don't need this in my data table. Oh, wrong click. Let's do it this way. Getting rid of all these columns is super satisfying. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and read the chat because it looks like I missed quite a bit.
I think the transcript, it could be its own comedy show for data warehouse nerds.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna move all my keys to the beginning because that's what I like to do. Let me go back and get rid of this sales rep. All right. So I have a much better looking data table. Now, no Power BI data model is complete without a date table. There are always 10 ways to skin a cat. I could build a date table in M in Power Query. I could build a date table in DAX. But I like Excel. And it's faster in a demo. So I'm going to grab a date table out of Excel. Let's grab it. We'll call it date. And we'll put it in our Lookup Tables folder. Looking good. Now, I got one more piece I got to deal with, and that's budget information. So I got these budget files. I got a different budget for every year. So I could bring these in and append them, but I know Alex will probably call me out for doing that. So I'm going to connect to the folder instead of connecting to each file. So let's go grab the folder. Browse to my folder of budgets. All right, I see my 3 budgets. Let's combine and transform. Let's pull it in, see what we've got in this budget table. Come on, Power BI. Keeps flicking back and forth. Let's get Power Query back up. All right, here's my budgets. It's going to be a data table. So let's get it into the data table. All right, so here's budgets. They've combined them all into different. All right, so I see my 2020 budgets, see my 2019 and my 2018. But all my months are columns. This is how every budget file I've ever seen in my life is set up. So let's do some Power Query magic on this. So first of all, let's grab, I just want the year. So let's do first 4 characters of my file name to get my year. I'm going to do some unpivoting. So my months become rows. There we go. We'll rename this to be month and amount. And I'll just tell you right now, before I knew this existed, like when I first started using Power BI, somebody sent me a budget file and I literally copied and pasted and did like paste transpose. It was super painful, and I wish I had known this existed because it would have saved me several hours. That unpivot button is gold to me. But okay, so we got our table in a little bit better format. But let's do a couple things first. So let's build a date column, right? I don't want January and February or January in 2018. I want to be able to join to my date table with on the date. So let's just do this. Let's call this date, and we'll say I want month and a dash and whatever source.name is, and didn't rename it to year. So I got January-2018. Let's let Power Query convert that to the actual date for me. Get rid of these. And then I need that surrogate key. I got to have that integer over here instead of that branch name. So like I did before, let's merge with branches. Branch equals store name. Fork in the road button. Let's grab our branch key. Let's get rid of the branch column. There we go. I got 2 data tables, 5-ish lookup tables. I'm going to close and apply. I feel like I took my Franken table and came up with a star schema. We'll see what happens. I don't remember if I have auto detect relationships turned on or not. Let's cross our fingers. All right, so I got, and I'll be honest, I'm going to do I'm not going to make a star schema. I'm going to use the Collie method since I work at P3. Let's move some of these tables over. Some of them picked up, some of them didn't. All right, let me zoom back in. Turn these on. So product, currency, date, order details. Let's build some relationships. Order details. Let's grab date. Just building out my one-to-many relationships that my star schema documentation tells me I need to do. Did I delete the currency key? Probably. We'll forget that exists. We only sell in US currency anyway. Shroot bucks and Stanley nickels aren't real. All right. I could hide some columns, make things a little bit prettier, but I'm ready to start building out my report. I got a nice, we'll call this a constellation schema because I have 2 centers of my star. But with that, I'm going to end 1 minute and 20 seconds early, in case anybody has any questions. But that's me building out a star schema from a Franken table in Excel.
Love it. Well, before we get to Q&A, how about we all go off mute, give a round of applause to Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Now, for all the chatter that we had going on, if I don't hear a question, I will be surprised. So hopefully there's some questions out there, or maybe some comments. I know everybody was talking about, different Power Query methods and talking about different things. So speak up.
Hey, Greg, Ron here. This is sort of nostalgic. From one of our very, very first Power BI user group meetings, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago or so, 5 years ago, I went through this same sort of presentation. So it's sort of like this basic technique was good back then, and it's good today. So I really appreciate revisiting that.
Love it. Any questions from anybody on what they saw today, or just on concepts of star schema?
Yeah, I got one. So how do you deal with multiple fact tables? Like, let's say you have a financial table, a sales table, and then maybe some other fact table. How do you manage that or get around that?
So I kind of do what I did here, treating budgets as a fact table, right? So I try to avoid at all costs ever relating two fact tables together or two data tables together. And if they need to be, like if I need to look at measures, right, like sales versus budget, or another good example is like you've got a sales table and an inventory table, and they're probably at very different levels of aggregation, right? Like an inventory table is probably every inventory transaction going in and out, almost like a general ledger. And then our sales table is just going to be, invoices. So that the fact tables are probably at different granularities, but then we use the dimension tables like we did here, in that we've got, and there's only some that are shared, right? So let's get branch and date together, right? So because I've got shared dimensions between branch and date, I can write measures in budgets and write measures with combined sales, and I can visualize them together or combine the measure so that I'm dividing the sales amount by the budget amount. Ignore budget. If your example is inventory or procurement, whatever this fact table is, as long as we've got a shared dimension that relates both facts, then we can write measures against it.
And emphasize, do not create relationships between the fact tables.
Right. That was that beginning Sabre and Dunder there's just no good way to relate two fact tables together.
Right.
In data nerd speak, we call those conformed dimensions.
Yep.
Mark, again, Ron here. I would add that one thing I do as a general practice whenever I'm dealing with file-based data, I will always parameterize the file path and the file name, because as often happens, those locations change.
Oh yeah.
You just want to be able to go in and change a couple of parameter values and have all of your queries automatically updated. Right.
And in reality, what I normally do is I wouldn't use the Excel connector at all. Because as soon as I publish this, I got to use a gateway because these are saved on my desktop, right? So what I normally would do is I would save these files to a SharePoint library or a OneDrive library, and I would go grab them using either the SharePoint folder connector or using the web link to get to the Excel file online. That way I could avoid the gateway after publishing. But yeah, it's a great call out. Even when I do like SharePoint folder or OneDrive
Same thing, yeah.
I try to parameterize that as well.
Sage advice.
Yep.
So I want to call on those that have the hand raised, because I love that we're actually using this feature now in Teams since it's been out. I see Ashraf has his hand raised. I think it does it by who did it first. So if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, thanks, Mark. That's really helpful and very informative presentation. The only suggestion I have for you, just to because you want to be more efficient, is instead of duplicating the tables, you can reference them. I know that you explained that the reason that you didn't need to use the duplication because you are referencing a table that you need to modify later. So instead of actually doing that, you can actually have a master table that has everything in it, and you start referencing all the dimensions, and also reference the fact table that you need to adjust later on. And by doing that, you will end up with just one query, and all the facts and dimensions are referencing one query only instead of ending up with multiple queries.
Yep.
Am I missing something here, or?
Nope. I think referencing like a master table works. The duplicating the combined sales as opposed to, and then removing the Franken aspects of it. I think having a master table that all the dimensions reference
And the fact as well.
should work, yeah.
And the sales effect as well, yes.
Yeah, that would probably
Makes sense.
Yep.
Makes sense.
I think it
Okay.
definitely works. I mean, but Mark's teaching you kind of like that beginner phase. I think conceptually is just easier to understand. Like, oh, I can duplicate this and then create these things.
But the problem with the duplication, it ended up with multiple queries, which can actually increase the time when you refresh your file.
Oh yeah, and I should say this. I don't have any. I'm not trying to like have a slow refresh time. Typically, my efficiency, especially when I'm dealing with Excel files, is not in trying to have the most optimized refresh time. I'm trying to save clicks, right?
Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
This is probably something worth a follow-up, but it seems like I read a Chris Webb blog recently. For years, I had felt that, okay, efficiency means have a master query and then reference that query. But I seem to recall reading something recently, maybe the last 6 months or so, that debunked that belief that I had. I seem to recall, I can't point to the blog, but I seem to recall that it basically said, actually, no, referencing that query doesn't make it any more efficient. If anybody has proof of that otherwise, I'd love to hear it, because for years I held on to that notion, right? And I was disappointed to read that, oh, this isn't actually true.
I'm sure Alex can find it. And fortunately, Alex, you're the next one up on your question. And we have like 10 minutes left until we're going to transition over to Rachel. So I know we've got like 4 more people, so let's run through some of these questions.
Yeah, I mean, disable parallel loading, you should use a one master. There's a lot of techniques behind that, but we won't kind of dive into the weeds. I'll drop in a resource. Mark, so something I'm struggling with a lot this year, and I call it the BI bubble. I'm living out in the community. I see Marco, I see Daniel, I see everyone writing C#. We have to use Tablet Editor. I'm seeing all this deep talent. But then the other side of the fence is people that are just pulling in a spreadsheet for the very first time.
Yep.
Big denormalized, getting started. So the star schema tonight is like where they need to be. Not necessarily where they're at right now, but it goes back to, for new users, where do you see the best investment of their time? Is it more focused on the Power Query side? Like, well, what would it take to actually shape your data? Because that's really going to pay more dividends. Or is it just click, load, get to the canvas as quick as possible? Give me that perspective on the two sides, because you're dealing with it now too, with kind of doing general training, seeing more and more and more.
Yeah.
Love to hear your thoughts.
I think adding Power Query to like the brand new person, right, that wants to just get the data from their spreadsheet into Power BI to visualize on it. Adding Power Query as like, hey, you're brand new, let's actually start shaping the tables from day one. It does make the entry point a little bit more challenging, but I tend to kind of start out with that foundation because it's a hard habit to break, right? And what I hate seeing is new folks that build a report out of a one massive denormalized table that makes its way into production, and then it's slow, or it's too big, or the DAX gets too difficult, and then people have to start from scratch, right? So if I can teach folks to get into Power Query early, that's why I kind of knock that yellow load button, right? I want that edit queries button to be yellow because I want new users in Power Query. That's me.
I would agree too. I mean, if 80% of their time is spent cleansing the data, they should really learn kind of those skills.
Yep.
Star schema doesn't really make any sense in their world if this is really the first time they're thinking about even staging or preparing their data. And maybe the first time hearing the acronym ETL. Like,
Yep.
I'm 100% with you. It's just dashboard in a day. The thing that I'm calling it now is what is the day after the dashboard in a day. They hit 6 months worth of using the program. They don't know a star schema. They're going back and hitting, restart. Is it better for them to find value first and then come back and learn it later, or to be a much longer tail, take it incrementally, one thing at a time? I don't know. I struggle with it. Like I said, I'm something that I think a lot about lately.
I think it depends on the audience, right? Like you could look at it from different perspectives. Like if you have a finance guy asking, trying to answer a question, they don't care how they get the data. They just want it accurate and they want to answer the question as quick as possible. But on the data side, if we're trying to build a report that we can automatically refresh and optimize it, I think that's where data team comes in and kind of helps out with that, right? So hopefully you can have that structure.
Well, I love that as a setup for the data culture one after this conversation. But yeah, 100% with you there, Jeff.
Love it. All right, let's go to the next question. Leo, you had a question?
Yeah, so it's actually more of a comment, but I noticed that when Mark was making all his dimension tables, he was duplicating the table and then removing all those columns. And I just watched a video on doing something like that, but instead of actually duplicating the table, they just did a group by using that table, and they did a group by on the columns that they wanted in the dimension table. So it's it might save a lot of time to just do that group by instead of going through and deleting all the columns and then removing duplicates. So just a heads up out there for people.
Good feedback.
Great. And then we have Eliud. You had a question as well?
Yeah, thank you so much. Great presentation, Mark. So just quick question about the naming of your tables and if you have any strategy or advice. So the dimension tables starting with DIM and fact tables with fact at the beginning or something like that. I was just wondering whether like when it comes time to writing your DAX queries, if you've thought about if that makes it easier just to remember, where what is coming from and so on.
Yeah, I definitely didn't clean up my names very well in this demo, but what I typically do, typically I'm not going to expose my fact table at all, right? So combined sales and budgets would probably both be hidden. And then, I mean, prefixing with dim works, but it does kind of add that BI bubble barrier a bit, because like most people that use reports, they don't know what a dim versus a fact table is. I like to call my lookup tables just what they are, right? So if I was really building this model out, I would say branch or branches, product or products. I usually call my date table a calendar table. I really just try to keep my table names just descriptive of what they are. And then I typically hide my fact tables and put my measures into a measure table called calculations. But I know there's debate about whether that hurts Q&A or not, but that's my approach usually to table naming.
Yeah, there's a lot of schools of thought, right? Do you add dim and fact? Do you just keep it very business term? And to your, for the Q&A visual, the Q&A visual needs such a specific, naming of columns, grouping of the DAX, the relationships. Q&A almost needs its own kind of, its own offshoot of model
Right.
to work. Yeah, there's different schools of thought, and I'm glad you could speak to both.
Yep.
All right, last question before we let Mark go to sleep, because he's on Eastern time and it's almost 9:30 there. The man has had a long day. Greg, what is your question?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Hey, first on a comment on that, if you're building this in desktop, you're generally going to be sharing, right, or publishing it, and then probably unless you're going to have people using Analyze in Excel, probably not really a reason to name, dimension, or fact tables unless you have multiple people building on that single Power BI desktop report, right? So first of all on that, and then second of all, how would data flows play into this? Instead of using Power Query to grab your stuff, especially if you start working with larger data, how would data flows play into that? And would that be a good place to go?
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's a good call out. What I would say is a data flow for all of these cleansed tables would be a perfect use of data flows, right? Because then, Greg wants to build another, report off of this same type of data, and he doesn't want to do all of this same transformation. So in the real world, what I would do is I would create a new data flow. I would come in here and I would just copy these queries, paste them in the data flow, wait for it to validate, and then click refresh. So that, I don't want to do this again in the browser. I would just copy these from desktop into the data flow and let Power Query and M do its magic.
Yep,
But yeah, it's a great call out. This is
beauty-
a good data flow use case.
The beauty of data flows is being able to almost modularize your different pieces of the data model. And I think one thing that, and I think right now for data flows, only the creator can edit them, but soon they're working on being able to have others edit them, and that'll be a big help, especially if you have a collaborative team. All right, with that, we're at 6:30 Pacific. Let's give Mark just another round of applause for sticking on and just awesome presentation. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Mark.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.